Hello and welcome. After Dark Hours here. It's the Siege show before the finals of the 6 Invitational, and we've got two of the biggest brains in the business. It's Guzz and it's Carter, and we've also got Jesse.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Guzz looked like he distinctly disagreed with my label as one of the biggest brains in Rainbow Six Esports.
As he should be.
You look like you disagreed with
I've
that.
got 10 of the biggest dogs. I'll tell you that much.
Now to give
We
some,
are 10 seconds in.
to give some insight in terms of where we've been today. Unfortunately, it's been a very long day, and that is not an understatement. So we are obviously going to look to push through here and get a little bit focused in on a recap of the playoffs, tiny bit of the groups maybe, but mainly the playoffs, and then also preview into the finals. We've also got the giveaways, of course, that are happening at the moment. So we've got a couple of credit giveaways along with the poster. Have you both signed the poster?
No.
I
didn't know there was a
did.
poster.
I think I did sign the poster.
We'll get you decided after.
There was
Okay.
a poster on a table, and I did
That
sign
one
it.
over there.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
Give it
I
away.
signed that.
Okay, so we got one signature, and then we'll get Jesse's signature as well. You can't see it from there, Jesse,
Nope.
but that's okay.
I sure can't.
To get involved, of course, for that giveaway, make sure you guys are part of the Patreon, ideally. Otherwise, hit subscribe, leave comments, all of that. Get involved, hit the bell, whatever. We need subscribers, and we really like them. Jesse, you agree with this?
I do. I would subscribe to these men. I'm not, but I will
you-
after this.
Fuck.
Shout out to subscribers.
Jesse.
I will. You know what? Right after we're done.
All right.
He's not going to do it.
Cool. Got through the intro
He will.
housekeeping. Let's get into the 6 Invitational itself here. Predominantly focusing on the playoffs because we haven't really had a Siege show since the beginning of this tournament, even pre-group stage. But by this point, I think everyone's pretty much aware as to how the group stage did play out. First and foremost, I'll go to you first, Jesse, here with the way that the kind of playoffs did unfold. You enjoyed the format and probably went as expected?
Yeah, there were some confusions about the format in terms of where lower bracket teams went. Despite this being our third time running the exact same format, but no, I mean it's good. It's SI double elim bracket. We started off with a couple teams falling down into that lower bracket who have now kind of started to make that run. So I'm excited.
Carter, how did you think the playoffs went?
I think GK really disappointed me quite a bit. I mean, sure.
Or meta in general?
I would say meta in general. I'm gonna be honest. I didn't have a whole lot of high hopes for Falcons. I thought maybe they'd do a little better, but they made it into the actual bracket itself. And when they got matched against Liquid, I expected them to lose. I think GK were really punished by dropping leader, and I was pretty disappointed with them going out in groups. But I would say overall, I think the bracket really transpired like I'd expected. Aside from that, with the teams that went home and with the teams that ended up making it.
Two teams here that, by the way, topped their groups and actually moved forward, which was Virtus Pro and Sonics. The other two teams that topped their groups were SSG and G2, both of which lost in their upper bracket games. They lost to Dark Zero and they lost to FaZe. What did we, I guess, make of the teams that kind of did really well in groups, evidently, topped their groups, and then maybe missed out your G2s and your SSGs, for example?
Well, I think it's telling that Sonics A got the easiest group and then B had like the easiest couple games to start playoffs. I don't know who they're paying. I don't know what they've sent to Tom Clancy to get this sorted through. But I mean, they've had a particularly easy run. Not that they haven't played well.
They have.
Right? I think their lowest game in particular showcased what they can do against good opponents. But I'm not sure who's making these schedules, but I would like to have a word with them.
Yeah, for reference, of course, they ended up getting Wolves, but that was after Wolves beat W7M.
Wolves looked awful and exhausted in that game.
Yeah.
They looked very, very beat.
I will say they looked really good in the Bliss game though. So
Yeah.
Bliss up, baby.
True.
Yeah. The other team, of course, Carter, Virtus Pro, they got NIP. And NIP, no disrespect, but clearly one of the weaker Brazilian teams at this tournament, and they had a pretty good game against them as well.
Yes, but I actually think that particular matchup is an interesting one because I think NIP, stylistically speaking, counters VP in a really weird way because VP have sort of, we always joke that they still play like the old Empire lineup, and I think with some small changes, that still very much is the case. And in Copenhagen and Atlanta, it was even more so. But I think the meta we were in at the time punished it a little bit more. But NIP have always been this team where they played much slower than their regional counterparts. They also played a bit more random at times, but that's a conversation for another time. I think when you go against VP and you basically have two teams that are kind of waiting for the other to blink, it results in a situation where anything can happen in 10 to 15 seconds. I think VP are ultimately the better team in those particular cases, but I think there is a reason why I think at Atlanta, NIP beat VP on either in a best of one or in a best of three. I can't quite remember, but that's always been a weird matchup to me where I agree NIP are the worst team, but VP have always struggled, it seems, at times with NIP.
If you can cast your mind back, another game, of course, from that particular portion of the bracket, G2 and FaZe, you were able to cast that one with
Great game.
with
Great
Stokes.
casters.
Very good casters.
Many have said this.
Many have said this.
Especially Reddit.
And guess
Especially
what?
Reddit.
In a G2 FaZe matchup, you couldn't get biased either.
No, I couldn't. No NA teams.
What do you think? What did you make of it? Obviously, FaZe were able to get the job done over G2, defending champions, topped their group, and then lost immediately to start the playoffs.
I think, I said this about the first map to a lot of people in private, but I think the first map is one of those maps that are as close to perfect siege as you can get played, and I don't think those games necessarily have to be 8-7s. I think, for example, if you look at the Chalet game that W7M played against Virtus Pro, the first 3 to 4 rounds of those games are pretty much, for that meta especially, close to perfect siege from W7M, and I think FaZe G2 was the same on Cafe. I think after that, FaZe continued playing at their level, and I think G2 started making a little more mistakes. I still think they played good overall, but against, honestly, one of the favorites to win the tournament, and the other G2 also being a favorite to win the tournament, if you end up just making more small mistakes more consistently, that's going to cost you. I think G2 played good, but FaZe ultimately played better.
Yeah. Now, Jesse, I don't obviously know what games you ended up actually covering because it's not on the Wikipedia.
And you do no research.
Yeah.
Famously.
We're only able to obviously
We tried
see
to
the
book Corn Pop, but he wasn't available.
He's a busy man.
Yeah, he is.
But the last one from that upper quarterfinal was actually one we can maybe get your thoughts on because it featured 2 North American teams.
Mm-hmm.
Shh, no comment. Dark Zero and SSJ 2-1 massive game. Do you recall it at all?
You're in luck. I worked this game. This was me and
my-
Gabe on the desk for NA's
NA bias right there.
the Battle of America,
Yeah.
and it was cool because it was like a very stylistically different game of Siege. We talk a lot about how this tournament's coming down to like who can attack better, and for Dark Zero, they've almost just like they were so refusing to adapt to like meta changes over the last like year, and now the meta has like changed back that they've just like weathered the storm, and they're definitely in with some new tricks. Like we highlighted in the pre-show of that game, the Ying that Pamba has been playing, and how it has just been absolutely dominating so many teams. And since the game where I highlighted that Ying, every single team has banned Ying against Dark Zero. They love to do these pushes where it's like they'll fill a room with Candelas and Bees and Capital bolts, and they're still pushing somewhat like directly, like it's still relatively linear versus like the kind of split theory type garbage you're seeing out of Europe and Brazil.
Bold to call it garbage. But
I'll call the term garbage. It's fine strategy. It wins games. But so Dark Zero is still kind of doing like a very traditional style of Siege with some like new twists on it. And SSG, I think, are trying to do more of that like split theory style pushes where they're separating their players a lot more. They're trying to collapse in on the map. And I think that Dark Zero just ended up executing their strategy better than Space Station did. It came down to a very close, I think Bank was the final map. It came down to a very close game.
Yep.
And we ended up seeing Dark Zero on top. But both teams, I thought, played very, very well. I think both teams are going to be good. I think Dark Zero, obviously Space Station are out. I think Dark Zero are going to be contenders to win the Hammer. I think they're absolutely a team you got to consider to come first place in this tournament. It just kind of depends, like, how strong do they really stack up without that Ying.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, you bring the Ying. I mean, Ying and Dokkaebi are basically like the 2 main bans at the moment in terms of attacker operators. So it's probably like, hey, a target ban, but also kind of a meta ban as well when you take that into account.
Sure,
We'll continue with the upper bracket because there's only 2 other games in here. We'll go to Sonics and FaZe. This was the wonderful Pengu and Intera. They got to cast this one. 7-4 on Oregon, and then a wonderful 8-7 on Clubhouse. FaZe get rid of the Sonics, send them down to the lower bracket. Either of you watch this game by chance?
yeah, I did.
Yeah. I thought it was a close game.
Sorry.
Yeah, we will.
I had a slightly better game.
Yeah.
Was
Sorry.
this the TriCast with Fresh?
No.
That was the one right after or
Yep.
something.
That was the W7M and SSG game, which we'll get to later.
I mean, I thought it was a very close game. Sonics, I think, played well, but I mean, FaZe or FaZe. That's a tough one.
Yep. I mean, for me, again, I think Sonics played well. I was particularly impressed with a lot of the individual moments from Ambi and I think it was Citizen as well. I've really been impressed with Ambi and Citizen throughout this tournament. Obviously, Citizen, I think, still the highest rated player. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I'm pretty sure he still is.
Last I saw it, he's up there.
Yeah,
Pretty sure.
yeah, and Ambi's also been having a very good tournament. Again, like not blowing anybody's socks off, but for a rookie debut, been pretty impressed with him so far. I thought there were a lot of good moments there, but I still think FaZe are just one of the ultimate contenders. And when you kind of have a run like Sonic's where you had a pretty easy group and then you faced an opponent like Wolves that is very tired, I think they still played well, but I think ultimately that's probably going to be a bit of a shock to the senses. Like you got to switch into a new mode almost because it's going from like not mid-tier opponents, but sometimes mid-tier play for a variety of factors, not inherent to the team's skill. And then you got to play someone who can win the whole tournament and has been predicted to win the whole tournament.
And I do think like it's helpful sometimes to like learn to lose. Like for the Sonics, they've had like a relatively easy run through the tournament. So then to play FaZe, one of the favorites, a great team, I'm sure they learned a lot from that.
Yeah.
And I think that they're now going to be a very scary threat in the lower bracket. They have a tough first opponent in the lower bracket. But I do think that like if they're able to learn from that, if they're able to take that and like improve a little bit, they're going to be a very scary team.
I also think a 7-8 loss to FaZe map 2 is not a bad result whatsoever.
Not.
Like
No.
Again, FaZe are predicted to win the whole tournament, and there's a lot of stuff like you said the Sonics can learn, but they still put up a really good fight against FaZe. And not to toot, Reddit, I'm sorry, not to toot NA's horn, only region and team to beat FaZe's tournament, SSG 2-0.
well, yes, they're out now.
So the streets are saying maybe that's true.
So what you're saying is FaZe have no one to contest them now.
I think FaZe will win the whole tournament, but that's a conversation for another time.
We'll head to the other upper bracket game, which was, of course, Dark Zero versus Pro, and it was the game that we were able to cast, and obviously had a very viral casting moment from myself.
Did you?
Viral casting moment.
Just pointing it out there.
You dropped the magic.
Is this are you the Xenox cast from the R6 Esports Twitter account? What the is happening moment?
Well, you can fucking swear.
Yeah, you can swear on this, you fucking
It's
shit
an
cunt.
Australian
No
podcast.
way!
If I'm gonna fucking swear on the main broadcast, I think you can swear on
Okay,
our
well,
podcast.
hold.
Yeah.
Artistic license. Though.
Bringing it back here. I mean, assuming obviously you guys were probably watching it.
Well, I was watching it, so I can
you
always.
definitely
I
were
can.
watching
I was
am
also
s-
watching it.
I am still here.
I
I can
wasn't.
talk.
You know what? Yeah, I'll get Guzz in on this one. Guzz, how did you find that game?
I actually found it a very intriguing game to watch because it felt like a little bit of a time machine, right? We saw a lot of echo play. We even saw the Maestro at times as well. And a lot of the win conditions was actually around the plant. And I think you mentioned it maybe at one point that these two were the teams that had like the highest plant percentage or may have
Dark
at
Zero.
the time. Dark Zero especially. And there were multiple rounds where it came down to, direct plant denial. And we saw, it was like bank basement to me that really stood out, where teams continued to try and force default plants. We never saw like a flood hatch drop or like a split push basement or anything of the sort. It was like bring the Monty and or quick map clear and then just keep trying to go for default plant on bank basement, which I have not seen really at all, especially in the international map for quite some time. So I just thought that was really, really intriguing. Of course, that huge moment that you mentioned, the clutch always. 0.3 seconds on the fuse, 3 versus 1 in favor of DZ. If that plant goes down, they would have won the map. Simple as that.
6 bullets in the SMG-11, by the way.
Then Dark Zero, of course.
And the planter, I think it was Pambasu, if I remember correctly, was inside of a smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, he
So
was.
6 bullets inside of the smoke, 0.3 seconds. When I watched back that clip, firstly, I was actually critiquing my own casting, thought I was just far too emotional. And I was like, I wish I had been able to convey why I got so excited in the moment. But there was like 5 different reasons as to why that was such a pivotal moment. Match point round in the smoke, 6 bullets in the chamber, 0.3 on the timer. You just can't convey all of that information. So you just go for the
You just say
emotion.
fuck.
Well, I was about to say, yeah. I was about to say, I think that I definitely would disagree that you, in that moment, needed to convey something because you don't need to tell the audience, oh, he had 6 bullets left. You don't need to say like, oh, he shot him through a smoke, because they all see that. But what you need to remind them is like, holy shit, and I'm gonna say it, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah, what the fuck happened there?
And I think you did that perfectly. Like, I don't think you needed to do anything differently in that moment. So
I'll also
be
say
down on yourself, and I'll beat you.
I was watching A stream this day. I was like, I'm gonna focus on the A stream games, but for whatever reason, I was like a few rounds behind on the A stream. or early or something. Like I wasn't watching it in real time, and I had just finished like a map or something on the A stream, and I was like, I should go check in on the B stream, see what the score is going on, and I tuned in the 1v3. Or maybe they still had a couple players alive, but I tuned in at the dying seconds of that round.
Oh, he said the dying seconds word.
Only thing I heard, I saw the clutch and I heard the fucking, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is a great game. What am I missing? And I went back to the A stream.
And then it continued on, obviously, into the 15th round, of which Virtus Pro got the win. I think it was the second time as well for VP that they've actually been able to do that at this tournament.
I mean, the only thing I'd love to pick up there and obviously get your guys' thoughts as well is there was, as is naturally the case with close matches like this, especially with the team on attack losing out in OT, the discussion of infinite overtime, and if that's something that needs to be expanded into more games. I mean, again, obviously the most logical counter to that is logistical. It's if a game gets extended for another half an hour, it just fucks everything else. But in an ideal world, obviously, we would want it, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think that's the part of the problem. I think it's twofold. One, it's inherent to Siege, where you have a game like CS, where obviously, you know, there are, based on certain maps, advantages to T side or CT side, but because of how many different variables, how many more variables there are in Siege, that you know, 55-45 might become 65-35, depending on what happens, or 70-30, as we've seen in some cases on Clubhouse for the first half of this event, it felt like. And you're not really entirely dependent on the map or maybe certain aspects of the economy in CS. It could be maps, operators, utility, secondary utility. It could be a whole number of things. Bands, play styles, speaker, like all this stuff. Like it. So I think there's that, and I also think, like you said, it's logistical. If we want to have infinite overtime, we're like we would need to have longer tournaments. Like
teams are aware as well as to like what sides they're playing on. As such too.
The thing is though, it's the decider map, so it's not like a map pick where arguably there is a little bit more of that strategy or whatever in terms of the OT side.
True, yeah, that's actually a great point.
I mean, look, I don't.
VP.
I think it would be unfair for Dark Zero to look at that result and say, "Oh, if we had infinite overtime, we would." You should have fucking won the 3v1. Like it's as simple as that.
Love the conversation here, but we are a little bit strapped to 4 times, so let's continue on.
We don't want to put anyone to sleep.
This has been, of course, the upper bracket recap, so we'll just go straight into the upper bracket preview in terms of the upper bracket final that is coming tomorrow or today, whenever this comes out. FaZe and VP. The beauty of this now is we get to speculate rather than just go over results. Jesse, how do you kind of see this match going? Obviously, I think Carter said FaZe is looking like the team. Can Virtus Pro do it again?
So I've watched. I think I've worked almost every VP game. Certainly through groups, I worked a lot of their stuff. And I'm a big believer in VP. I think the way they're playing right now is really, really clean. I think the way that they've adapted to some of their play styles and the way that they've incorporated more maps into their map pool. Their old maps that they've always done, they still play fantastic. Like you watch VP play Bank and it is still classic direct hits every time. You know what's coming and you have no ability to stop it. But then you look at the new maps like VP that they're playing, such as Border and Skyscraper, and you're like, okay, these are getting better every game. They're developing, you know, we're starting to see some real skill come out on these new maps. So to me, it feels like VP are really hitting a stride. And I love the way Posh has been playing. I drafted him on my fantasy team. Big believer. Also drafted Handy.
I drafted Dan, and he's the highest rated player in the tournament now.
We don't talk about fantasy, guys. Let's.
I think VP take it. I think
over here.
I just haven't watched as much FaZe, frankly, as I have VP, and the stuff I've watched from VP I've been super impressed with. So I'm gonna go with what I've seen and predict VP on that one.
Well, on that note, I have cashed out I think 2 FaZe games now. I think 2 FaZe games. But I've watched a lot of their games, whereas VP, a lot of the games I was casting during that, so I had to go back and watch some of them.
You did FaZe Los and FaZe G2.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I watched FaZe SSG pretty thoroughly when it was live. But anyway, beside the point. I also really like VP, and I think that if we were seeing VP in Copenhagen, for example, I don't think they'd have much of a chance. In Atlanta, I think they'd have a better chance, but not much of a chance. Here, I think it's going to be a 2-1, but I also don't think it's going to be VP. I'm really confident it's going to be FaZe because I like the changes VP have made. Incorporating Pasha, giving individuals a bit more flexibility, bringing more maps into the pool while still keeping their overall philosophy the same. But I think FaZe are so good at reading their opponents, not only before a game, but specifically mid-round in a game, against a team where the changes are more individual instead of strategic. I think they'll get tripped up. I certainly think they will. I think Pasha could cause a lot of problems for FaZe. But I think in the long run, which a series is, I think FaZe have the better reactions because they're the ones that change more often their strategy and round. They can go from playing really slow, really passive, plant-focused to instead saying, hey, we actually have found a gap here. Let's just flood in and fill it. Or they could start around playing the more split theory style, pressuring 5 points and then flooding in when they find the weakness and doing the exact opposite of what I just mentioned, then going to plant focused at the end of the round. They also are extremely good at recognizing in their own setups what potential weaknesses are. And again, when you're facing a team that is on the upswing, is looking very good, but is still one that is pretty consistent philosophically from where they used to be, I think the team that learns quicker and learns better is going to win.
All right. You willing to put 20 racks on it?
20 bands?
Yeah.
Got yourself a goddamn deal.
Well done. I mean, there you go. We've got the
hell
visual.
yeah.
The only thing I will add on to this discussion,
Don't make it too long.
not from an analytical perspective.
You got the number one yapper on here. I'm sorry. My bad.
I think for the quality of the tournament and for the crowd and the atmosphere, we have to have a Brazilian team in the grand final. So I am hoping that FaZe win. That's just my own personal bias. W7M, of course, can make the run to the lower bracket, but FaZe, I think, will win it anyway. So.
I actually think Virtus.pro is going to win it 2-1.
Nice. You want in on the bet?
I'm not in on the bet.
20
though.
each?
I'm not in on the
40
bet.
for
No
40.
three-way
No.
here. No three-way.
I'm
All right,
good.
that wraps up the upper bracket. I think it's obviously good that we were able to spend quite a lot of time on the upper bracket, rightfully so. These teams kept winning and winning and winning. Very quickly down to the losers bracket. We'll speed run this a little bit. I'm going to ignore the first section, but a couple of big results. W7M, of course, sent NIP home. There was a game that actually we got to cast. It was a pretty good cafe game, but ultimately W7M were far too good. SSG did also send Bleed home. There's a game you got to cast, actually. Yep. And I don't think Bleed did anyone... Bleed didn't do a disservice to themselves in that game. 7-5, 8-6. They certainly went up against SSG, a team who I think had a pretty good tournament. Ultimately, for Bleed, everyone kind of felt like they were the APAC team. Spoiler alert, they weren't. But they had a pretty good tournament. They didn't do any harm to what we saw from them in Atlanta.
No, not at all. I mean, I think they had a very successful tournament. I think they had the skill to push it farther. But I think one issue when you're facing SSG is like we saw in Atlanta and like we saw from, Astralis back at SI, SSG very much echoing that system in at least some aspects. The team is very explosive and the team can gather momentum from nothing like nobody else can. And I think when you're in a situation when you have an advantage, not because Bleed maybe made some crucial mistakes, but just because SSG can have big players pop off in any moment. Jane, I know, a big one this tournament, but also have a system where they are incredibly mentally resilient and always feel like they have a shot in this. You're going to be at risk of basically finding yourself reverse swept. So I think Bleed played great. I think they could have gone farther, but SSG sometimes and Astralis back at SI23, they're a comeback team, man.
G2 took down Liquid 2-0, 7-4, 7-4. Actually ended up being a bit of a sleeper kind of game, unfortunately, despite two heavyweights. And then Bliss, the darlings from Oceania, with the 2-1 win over Wolves. They lost 7-2 to begin on Clubhouse. Now, mind you, Clubhouse...
We always have a slow start.
...was their pick. And
right.
It's supposed to be their map. So when that happened, I was like, well, this is going to be over. They bounced back on Oregon out of nowhere 7-3 and then won it out on Consulate despite the Sens pick that they kept bringing. Which, by the way, I think Guzz found out, I think with the help from Fresh, it was like a 28% win rate.
I think heading into that game, it was close to 30 or less win percent for Bliss with Sense. I don't know what the fuck they were doing in Brisbane during the boot camp and how they thought that Sense was going to turn their chance around in this tournament, but I don't know. It didn't, to me, seem to be particularly successful. But on that third map, of course, Bliss, Wolves, almost everything that could go wrong for them in that second half pretty much went wrong.
I will say this, by the way. So it had been an exceptionally long day at this point. I was at the pool when I found out that Bliss beat Wolves, and I genuinely did not believe whoever told me. So experiencing this was a very fun night. Sorry, Wolves.
I'm assuming you guys saw the clip of the green room with the Aussie
yes,
boys
I
that I
did.
posted.
Oh,
Yeah. Good fun. All right, we got 2 games left to recap. W7M versus SSG, G2 versus Bliss. We'll quickly do G2 Bliss. Unfortunately, that was just a case of clearly outshining.
Bliss
a
got
team.
fucked next game.
Any thoughts on it?
I didn't watch it.
You didn't watch it?
Sorry.
Did you watch it?
Bliss G2?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bliss got fucked.
They got fucked. Yeah, they got fucked.
Understandably so.
On the other side, though, a bit of a less fucking. I mean, SSG, of course, they got sent home. We didn't obviously get to watch it. I'm assuming you guys.
I watched that one.
I
you
watched it
this
too.
one. What do we think of this one? Because SSG again had a good tournament. We kind of mentioned it a couple of times, especially in the early upper bracket portions. But it, to me, probably was a highlight of, hey, W7M are really starting to get going.
Exactly. Like, SSG played well. The problem is they're starting to play like a better and better W7M. By the time we got to Chalet on that map, it's just like no matter what SSG did, W7M were winning their entries. They were slamming them on so many of those rounds. And
Going into the side swap, they had not lost a duel.
yeah, I think like the very first round, SSG did like a double spawn peek. They had like Mute jump out of library window to distract while somebody else peeked the window, and both of them died. They both got shut down. I think KZ got one, Herds got the other. And it's like, I think that kind of set the tone that like you're gonna get fried by W7M this game. It was pop off from the Star Fraggers. They had some cool defenses as well, extending all the way on a top floor hold to like open every wall and basically hold library from long angles was cool. So I think SSG, like, I after that match was over, because Ashen started really, really bad in that game. I think he had one kill going into round like 7 or 8. He really, really was struggling. But I tweeted after that game like how much I've enjoyed and how good I think Ashen is as a player. Because I think if you give Ashen like 2 years to like get better at this game and to like improve with the system and all that, I think he gets to a point where he's slamming people like KZ and Herds. He's the next KZ and Herds, and he's going to be right where W7M are, pushing for hammers and winning majors.
I also think Map 2 is a big example of SSG having that ability to pull rounds out of nowhere. Like, that Fultz 3K into the hot... The Fultz 3K and hot and cold, Fultz 2v4, technically the same thing. Like, how the fuck does he do that? How does he get away with that? How does he do it? I don't know, but this team just has that ability sometimes, be it Fultz, hot and cold, Ashen, any of those 5 players can do it, and I think that's especially pertinent because W7M were the better team for a lot of those rounds on most of those maps. Obviously 2 of them because they won, but I think even on Cafe, they were very much in the lead, probably should have won, but SSG have a very, very great mental and a very, very great set of players who can bring rounds back out of nowhere.
So we've got our 2 preview games here before we close things out. The first of which is Lynnx versus W7M. How do we expect this one to go? I know there's a little bit of bias here from you. Lynnx is involved.
True. I mean, listen, I like Lynnx. I do think I have been a lot more cool on the Lynnx than a lot of other people have during this tournament. I think they're playing well, don't get me wrong, but I think the string of opponents they've had has kind of, I think, biased us a little bit towards what they can do. And while I think they are very good, they've gone through a lot of role swaps, they've gone through a lot of changes, and they're going from FaZe into a W7M who are improving. I think this game, because of that, could be easier than the FaZe game, both because of where W7M are in comparison to, like, say, Atlanta, while also Lynnx, after having that loss, have an opportunity to correct some mistakes. But maybe on the opposite side, it's a bit unearned, but I still believe in W7M a little bit more.
Okay, Jesse?
Yeah, I think Lynnx have played really well this tournament. I think their team play has been fantastic. But I think when we get to like overtime on map 3, when we get deep into a long, grueling series, W7M have been here over and over and over again. They've got the experience of these really tough matches in front of a Brazilian crowd.
Yeah, that's a big
and
one.
Lynnx have an 18-year-old who's never played Tier 1
You didn't have to
before.
bring Ambi into it, but...
Before this moment. And it's just like when you look at the overall experience, W7M are so far and above, and Lynnx have so many more players, obviously. But I do think that when it comes down to when the pressure is the highest, when that game gets to the very end, I think W7M will have the stamina to outlast SQ, because I think SQ just don't have time yet with this roster to compete.
Guys, very quickly.
I think Lynnx, if they play at their very, very best, noting that I actually haven't casted them in all of this event.
Yeah, we haven't.
But
I seriously have not seen them
Lynnx
much.
have to play at their absolute best, I think, to push it to a third. And as Jesse's mentioned, it will end up being an endurance test plus the crowd factor. Now, I know some people don't think it's that influential, but Brazilian crowds are fucking insane. Like, they are going to be absolutely giving it to Lynnx and making it very, very challenging. W7M, obviously not a huge org. I know we were discussing that a bit today, but I still think that the Brazilians are going to get behind anyone that's remotely South American.
Imagine you're performing in front of a crowd of 10,000 people and all of them want you to fuck up.
Yeah.
And your Ambi, you've never played in front of a crowd. This is your fucking
Again, don't bring,
first
you don't need to
SI,
bring
that's
Ambi into
crazy.
this.
You don't have to.
Ambi's been playing incredibly well so far.
He has.
Look,
Obviously,
this could be his donk moment.
Oh,
For any CS.
donk from C.
Yeah,
Yeah,
true,
that would
true,
be.
true.
Look, that would be fucking wild if
Just
it is.
saying. All right, and then the last game, big game. No Brazilian teams, but Dark Zero.
There are
and
3 games
G2.
tomorrow, by the way, not 2.
We already
We already talked about the top
talked
one.
about FaZe and VP.
Sorry, my apologies.
It is late. It's
He-
fine.
Your co-host is.
I'm doing that
literally
thing where I don't listen to what you say. I do
Exactly.
that.
He doesn't listen
I
to
do
me.
that too well.
Jesse, Dark Zero G2. Again, no Brazilian team, but talk about a matchup. NA versus EU. Defending champs. Dark Zero have looked amazing. So much history there. I think this is a huge game. And I'd be very surprised and even disappointed if this does not go through to the 3 maps.
I'm praying on G2's downfall so hard, but I just
Hey,
don't know if I can predict.
Big dog.
Big dog. No, the problem is I think they're playing very well and they're on that dream lower bracket run that they had last year. I mean, obviously they've not completed it yet, but I do think that like it's going to be a very tough game for Dark Zero. I've talked about G2 or Dark Zero already this tournament. I like the way that they're playing, but they have started to got like people have figured out Dark Zero at this point. People kind of understand how they play. I think G2's a little bit more inexperienced. I will say we've seen G2 crack under pressure this year. I think Atlanta was a great example of that. For Dark Zero, they're kind of a new roster, but I do think that they're maybe better in that instance of like not cracking when things get as tough. I think Canadians a very good IGL to like calm down the boys and be like, listen, we just got to refocus, we got to play together, whatever it is, and get them back on track. I don't know if Alan in front of a BR crowd is going to have that same ability.
I think that's a factor that really cannot be understated. I mean, Alamau kind of, Fresh has brought up, Fabian has brought up, Alamau has a reputation for feeling a lot of pressure when he faces Brazilian teams and sometimes freezing up, not calling as much, lacking in the individual performance. And he's in front of a crowd of people who, he left the region to go play for G2. I'm not flaming him for doing that, by the way.
Yeah.
I'd go play for G2 too.
Of course.
But that's going to have an effect on you, just as it's going to have an effect on Sonics, who are playing against a Brazilian team. I also think, as you said, G2 have been making a lot more individual mistakes since that SI run, Copenhagen, Atlanta, and even this tournament as well. Still making some individual mistakes. Even in that Bliss game, for example, on Oregon, I saw some gunfights missed. I'm like how? But that happens sometimes. It happens to the best of us, and I think DZ can capitalize off of it.
Very, very quickly, sorry guys, 2 seconds, but like Bolo, obviously there was a lot of question marks around his return. Probably didn't have the start to the tournament he would have liked. Absolutely popped off in that final do-or-die match.
Had the
against
sauce
VP.
on Skyscraper, to be
And
sure.
they still couldn't get the job done.
True. Fair
But
point.
and this is the thing as well. They were only 1 round away. Had
Yeah.
multiple match points to get themselves into an upper bracket final. I think they've got every chance to be able to take down G2, but it's not going to be easy.
I think probably of the 3 games tomorrow, and I'm happy to be corrected if anyone disagrees, but I think that this might be the biggest contrast in play styles because at least from what I saw,
I would
in that-
agree with
I would
that,
agree.
At
honestly.
least what I saw in that DZ game from the one that we covered again, it very much felt like an very old school way of playing Siege. I know Dark Zero always has that reputation of being like structured and slow and whatever. You compare that to G2, and the one thing I've always noticed when just casually watching them or whatever throughout the tournament, especially on attack, it'll be a minute into every single attack, no matter the site, no matter the map, no matter what the composition is, they will have people in the map and they will be getting to work really, really quickly.
Yep.
So will Dark Zero be able to tame that? I'm not too sure. Are they going to keep playing for plant win conditions, whether it be denying it on defense or getting it down on attack? I'm not entirely sure if Dark Zero are going to be willing and able to change up their playstyle, or perhaps they don't even need to. I'm not entirely sure.
Virtue, by the way, having his best tournament over the last 12 months
Yep.
as well. So he's been incredible. All right, as we look to close out this episode of the Siege Show, I do want to get final predictions when it comes to the grand final itself. Who's in that top 2 and who wins SI24? Jesse.
I think Virtus Pro win upper bracket. We get
My man.
We get the dream run in the lower bracket where W7M go get better and better every single game. We get an absolutely insane FaZe Clan versus W7M lower bracket final where the crowd goes crazy. I'm going to say W7M power up. They win that game. They're going to have to play better than they have, but I trust that they can do that. And then it's a grand finals, VP W7M, and I'll go VP. Crush the hearts of W7M.
Against the grain. Guzz, quickly.
Fuck. I think that upper bracket final is going to be incredibly competitive, but I do think that FaZe clan has the ability to just edge out. So I'll back in FaZe. W7M.
Don't forget, by the way, you can have a repeat. It can be FaZe and VP. Just saying.
True.
W7M, I think, do need to play better than they have if they are to make that run and make it to the grand final. Do they have it in them? Probably. I don't want a double Brazilian grand final, but I don't know. I feel like it might happen. So I'll back FaZe W7M to make it. And then just for the storyline, W7M.
All right, Carter.
Well, get ready. I'm predicting an all-BR final. I think FaZe beat VP. I think W7M beat SQ. I'm reneging on my earlier promise. I think G2 beat
It
DZ.
didn't last long.
I think G2 beat DZ. I think we have a crazy game on stage. I'm gonna be honest, but because they show up in big moments. And then W7M beat G2. W7M beat VP. FaZe W7M final, where FaZe Clan proved they're the best team in the world.
Ooh.
Wow. So far, no one's predicted
So
W7M.
none of us know what the fuck we're talking about.
No.
Virtus Pro. FaZe.
W7M.
Oh, you did
Yeah.
go W7M. Okay.
Yeah.
So Virtus Pro, W7M, and you've gone with
FaZe.
FaZe.
You've got to pick a
Do
new
I
team.
just go and get like Dark Zero?
Just pick Sonics.
And B.
Can
And B.
Canadian-
And B.
Can Canadian lift the hammer again?
That would be... I think in
Bolo
term-
on the return.
for me,
There's a
the-
lot of magic there.
For me, the two big storylines are either W7M win, they lift the hammer, and then they enter the discussion of being the best team of all time, or Canadian lifts it for the third time.
What about
Yeah.
G2 back-to-back SIs?
I mean, that's a good
That's
story
also
too.
another banger. Yeah.
I think.
But what about Sonics and just fuck storylines and they just come out of nowhere and Ambi?
I think I'm gonna be honest. I love everyone on the Sonics. If they lift the hammer, I don't know how you sell that.
I think it's the worst storyline.
You'd be
for
getting
sure.
the dogs out.
I was
Yeah, I'd be
talking
getting
to-
the dogs out.
I was talking to Nick about this. I think the worst storyline is VP win and then Sonics go for the run and it's VP Sonics and all of Brazil just leaves. They're not even watching the grand finals.
I'm going to go... I said Virtus Pro would beat FaZe. I'll go Virtus Pro in the grand final. But I also think they will then play FaZe again. I think FaZe will then come back up, and then I think they'll get the revenge and they'll win the grand final.
Vamos.
We've all been able to enact our fantasies. So we'll see what actually happens.
Three of us are going to look like morons. Maybe four.
Honestly, all four of us look like morons already, but I do want to say you are very much lovely morons for coming on, of course, here on the Siege Show and giving us a quick little rundown of things to come and things that were. To close, how's SI been so far?
Oh, SI's been a blast. I love Brazil. I have to say this so I don't get stabbed. But I do love Brazil. It's been so nice being here and being part of the SI. And we just saw the venue today. Holy shit. It's going to be lit.
Lynnx?
I've had a great time as well. I think the matches have been some of the best we've had. Obviously, I don't fully remember SI 2020, for example, which has a high reputation because I was watching it as a fan.
And you
but,
were like 14.
Yeah, and I was like 12. But I've really enjoyed this tournament. My only disappointment has really been GK not showing up, who I thought alongside Bleed could continue to just be like really fun teams to root for. And also just really good teams in general. But aside from that, I've been very happy. I've enjoyed the matches both that I've casted or just watched. I've enjoyed the people I've worked with. The Godzilla over here especially.
We didn't really work together.
Well, no, but
I
I
actually did get to cast.
no, but I got to take my shoes off in a green room next to you.
You
Oh
certainly
my
did.
God.
So I've had a great time.
That's good.
How
Guzz?
about you guys?
Yeah, I've really been enjoying my time. Obviously, a privilege to be here, and looking forward to the live portion. As Jesse said, the arena, the layout, and the fact it's sold out. I swear to God, this should be the best fucking SI ever. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, once again, as always, for those watching along here at home, hopefully you enjoyed this episode of the Siege Show, and hopefully you also enjoy the finals to come. Let us
And
know.
these two.
Yeah, and these two. Let us know in the comments down below who you think's going to win Six Invitational 2024. Of course, we've got the giveaway. Jesse's going to be joining and posting,
And
signing the poster.
Oh.
And subscribing
And
after this.
subscribe.
And subscribing. Don't be like Jesse. Make sure you go and subscribe, hit the bell, leave the comments down below, and we will see you in the next one.
Peace.